All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We try to tune you into great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, cosmologies, magnum opuses, grand unified theories, tour de forces, earth-shattering discoveries. And mainly they emanate from obscure sources, things you probably haven't heard of before. I'd say most of the areas that I cover in these videos are pretty much not found on the internet. Most of them are from people who are heroes of mine, who really went for it, and they put their whole soul into their research. They never got any credit, they never got any money. They just did it because they were trying to uncover the truth about something. And as a result, they have been stashed upon the trash heap of history. We're trying to resurrect their work. And we are on episode 237 of the unit that we're calling the Reciprocal Church, which is all about putting together spiritual resources from some of these obscure sources. We've looked at a lot of deep meditation, exotic mental states or states of consciousness through deep meditation, particularly from kind of a American Buddhist, but more of a syncretist, and then also some stuff about ecstatic music, and we delved into obviously the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson, the Tree of Life, hundreds of videos on Tree of Life and reciprocal system. And we've got stuff coming up on sacred geometry and music and mathematics. Hopefully we'll get into some language and definitely high intensity long-term endurance training. And maybe I'll come up with some other stuff. I've got a few things in mind, but we are doing this because we're trying to come up with alternatives for the Western religions, which we believe are about to cave in, about to collapse, because they just don't stand the test of evidence and believability. As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, there is zero evidence for the existence of Jesus and outside of the New Testament. And so that's kind of what we're getting into. My current hypothesis, which is becoming stronger and stronger as I read on, is that the Gospels and probably the entire New Testament was composed by the Romans. The Roman Caesars, particularly of the Flavian dynasty of Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, from 69 to 96 AD. Their buddy named Josephus, who was, which is a pen name, he wrote Wars of the Jews, which is the supposed to be the history of the Jewish war from 66 to 73 AD between the Romans and the Jews. The Romans had colonized the Jews over a century earlier, and the Jews were constantly revolting and insurrecting. And so the Romans tried to do a little psychological operation on the Jews by backdating a character that was a Prince of Peace, a Jewish hero and potential savior as a Prince of Peace, a person who believed in turning the other cheek, rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and um, walking an extra mile with the Roman soldier's backpack, and many other pro-Roman and anti-Jewish things. And they had the means, the motive, the method, and really they were the only ones who had those things. It's kind of absurd to think that a bunch of not likely literate peasants who were following Jesus wrote this up, given that they were probably illiterate. Certainly they didn't read and write Greek, and the Romans had pretty much a monopoly over everything that was published. Nothing at this time got published unless it was under the auspices of the Roman state. And so there is really only one place to look. And so we're looking at a book from Michael Menescatz that just came out a few months ago called Christianity's Origins as a Flavian Secrecy Cult. The Flavians being the dynasty of Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian from 69 to 96 AD. So they backdated Jesus' story by generation, and then had all the things that Jesus predicts or prophesies in the story of the Gospels come true by the hand of Emperor Titus, who at that time was the military general for the war against the Jews, or his father Vespasian, who was also a military general and became the emperor. They fulfilled the prophecies of Jesus, and so therefore they are the second coming of Jesus. And this was all part of the plan for the Romans to get people first hooked on the idea of Jesus, and then eventually to recognize that, well, actually Jesus is just kind of a precursor to Titus. And then to recognize eventually that Jesus is entirely fiction and that Titus is the God that we need to be worshiping. I don't know that he necessarily needs this hypothesis, because I think his method, the magic in this book that I see is his method of graphing the parallels between the book of Luke and Wars of the Jews. 24 chapters of Luke on the vertical axis, and 694 paragraphs of Wars of the Jews on the horizontal axis. And there are over 250 parallels just in the book of Luke from Wars of the Jews. And when you plot a point at every one of those parallels, it makes a design as opposed to just some random arrangement. And that design is 5 Roman letters, APTVS. The V also doubles as a U, so it could be APTUS. That's kind of what Menescatz says, that it's aptus, which means apt or fitting, which fits into a little riddle that he just went through in last episode. But right now we're going to get to, so what he does in this book is he basically goes over all the 250 parallels, and you can see them for yourself. You can also get Josephus online for free as a PDF or whatever, and you can compare it with your Bible. You can read them side by side and find these parallels for yourself. But really, it took Menescatz, he said, like 4 years to figure out all these parallels, but then he graphs them out. But some of these parallels are pretty amazing in their level of detail, but also their level of hiddenness. Like you could pass it over very easily until you start to kind of analyze it, and you recognize that both of these passages are parallels to each other in multiple ways. Some of the parallels are more obvious, and some of them are admittedly fairly weak, but that was kind of the point. These Romans, they thrived on little word games and puns and riddles, typology. That was kind of a pastime in these ancient times, and so this would have been great entertainment for the Romans, especially after they just beat the Jews in this war. This is kind of just like adding insult to injury. There's a great deal of mockery and a great deal of mean-spiritedness in these Gospels, especially when you see them in the context of putting them side by side with Wars of the Jews. So we'll get into Menescots right now and go through his next parallel. So the next parallel we come to in Jewish war is at paragraph 540, and it relates to how Titus encircled Jerusalem with his legions, arranged his scorpion war machines, and how allegedly it was because the Jewish house, or Jerusalem's famous holy house, was divided that it ultimately fell. Okay, let's turn the page here, turn the mechanical page. Okay, this looks like okay, there's a couple parallels here on this page. The amount of information on one of these pages is just overwhelming. Okay, Jewish War, paragraph 540, 541. That's book 5, chapter 2, paragraphs 3 and 4. Titus marched and arrived at night, deciding his men were tired, and arranged 3 legions around Jerusalem. He also arranged ballistae, also known as scorpions, which launch stones. They're just like catapults, I believe. Meanwhile, the factions in the city fought each other. The Jews cried out, quote, "We are only courageous against ourselves, while the Romans will gain the city by our sedition." The parties in Jerusalem had been fighting each other, now began to think of an awkward concord, and said, "We are, it seems, only courageous against ourselves, while the Romans are likely to gain the city by our sedition." I don't know why he puts that in there twice. Maybe it's a typo. Or it could be that parallel that's needed twice. I don't know. Then the Jews attacked the Roman camp unexpectedly, and many soldiers were killed running to get their arms. Titus came with more forces and scattered the Jews. But John's forces became still more and more in number, as encouraged by the good success of those that first made the attack. Okay, now we go to Luke chapter 11, verses 5 through 29. And so remember, a lot of the, I don't know if this fits into the pattern, but one of the major patterns is that the 3-year ministry of Jesus is parallel to the 3-year military campaign of Titus in Judea. And where they go in Judea, where Jesus goes, Titus goes, in the same order. And what happens at that site, wherever Jesus is, happens symbolically to Jesus, or is prophesied symbolically by Jesus. And then that whole kind of concept is fulfilled literally by Titus. Okay, so Luke 11, verse 5. Which of you will go to him at midnight and say, lend me 3 loaves, for my friend in his journey is come to me? Then it goes on, he from within shall say, trouble me not, the door is now shut. My children are asleep with me. Knock, and the door shall be opened. If a son shall ask for bread or fish, will he give him a stone or scorpion? But he, knowing their thoughts, said, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against itself falls. Or a house divided against a house falls. If the house of Satan is divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? When a strong man armed keeps his palace, his goods are in peace. When a stronger one comes and overcomes him, he takes his trusted armor from him and divides his spoils. He that gathers not with me scatters. The crowds were increasing. People were gathered thick together. And Jesus said, this is an evil generation. No sign be given to it, but that of Jonas, the prophet. Okay. Now, I can see kind of how Menescots might find some of these different parallels, looking at key words. Like, so in these 2 passages, I would say that scorpion is a key word. And when he sees Josephus use the word scorpion to describe this weapon, you know, that reminds him of a passage in Luke where he's referring to a scorpion. Jesus refers to a scorpion. If a son shall ask for bread or fish, will he give him a stone or scorpion? Especially another key for looking at this stuff is when like a non sequitur is said, or just an offhand irrelevant comment, like that's just Jesus' line there. If a son shall ask for bread or fish, will he give him a stone or scorpion? That's just kind of too random. It doesn't really make that much sense. It's kind of a dangling thing there that you're like, there must be some other reason why that word is there. And then especially if you know Josephus and you know that he has a place for scorpions in his text also, that brings it together. Another word here that you would kind of see, oh, well, maybe is the word scatters. So Jesus says, he that gathers not with me scatters. And oh boy, something bad just happened on this computer. I completely lost my my text here. Don't really know what I'm doing right now. I think I need to. No, I can't close this. What happened? I am very sorry. Trying to fix the problem. I guess, you know, powers that be don't want me to do this. I actually get very annoyed when I listen to people who say that line. Like, what I'm doing is so important that, you know, the powers that be don't want me to. And so they screwed with my computer. I think I can survive the way it is right now. Okay. Now, he says, Once again, there are so many metaphorical parallels in these passages that it is clearly intentional. But the next one has even more. So I don't know. Hopefully he analyzes that first set eventually. But we're going to go to the next set, which is right in the same line. Jewish War, the next paragraphs, 542 to 547. And also Luke chapter 11 again, but this time a little bit later in chapter 11. So, you know, this is still on that V of the U or the V on APTVS. That's the diagonal line on the right-hand side of the V. That is when the parallels are in order, because, you know, as you go up in Luke, you go out in Josephus. So you get a diagonal line. Now, it'll be interesting when he gets into like the T, the vertical line. That means that one particular paragraph of Wars of the Jews is actually being paralleled by pretty much every chapter of Luke. And the horizontal lines where, you know, one chapter of Luke has ton of different parallels in the same kind of vicinity of paragraphs in Wars of the Jews. Okay, so Jewish War, paragraph 542, chapter 5, book 5, chapter 2, paragraph 5. The Jews pretended to be vulnerable and then rushed on the Romans unexpectedly. And Caesar comments that the Jews lay ambushes against himself. Caesar, I'm guessing that means Titus, but that the Jews lay ambushes against himself. And he says, therefore, Titus. Titus was in the valley adjacent to Siloam, and Titus fell on great numbers as they marched down the hill. And this was outside Jerusalem. In Jerusalem on the 14th day of Nisan, which is a month, when it is thought the Jews were freed from Egypt, John sent men with concealed weapons into the temple. Now, John is one of the Jewish zealot leaders, the rebel leaders. And those were his enemy, those were his enemy ran away. Maybe those who were his enemy ran away, avoiding an engagement. But those who had no concern in the sedition stood trembling at the altar with wooden and iron weapons. So he's making a comparison here between the group of people with concealed weapons. They avoided the engagement, but those who had no concern in the sedition stood trembling at the altar. Okay, then these men also seized this inner temple and deposed Simon. Simon is another one of the Jewish rebels. And Simon, John, and Eleazar, or Lazarus. And they are the leaders of the three factions. They fight against each other a lot, according to Josephus. Thus, the sedition, which had been divided into three factions, was now reduced to two factions. But Titus had come with 3 legions, so it was now 2 against 3. The Jews devised a cunning strategy, which Titus was suspicious of. Ignoring Titus's orders, some Romans fell for it. I kind of can't imagine that's Josephus's language there, but he takes some liberties here in the quotations. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is. I've read the book, but it's been a while. The Jews blocked their retreat. Titus weighed the laws of war and considered executing them all. And the soldiers despaired, expecting just execution. But the other legions promised they would make amends, and Titus considered how they might get even with the Jews. Titus, who came for 3 years before returning to Rome, had come to Jerusalem. He gave orders for the army to clear the ground all the way to the wall of the city. So they threw down the bridges and walls and cut down all the fruit trees. Okay, now we're going to read from the book of Luke. And this starts in chapter 11, but it goes into chapters 12 and 13 also. So it starts at the end of chapter 11 and then spills into chapters 12 and 13. The scribes and Pharisees assailed him vehemently, lying in wait for him to catch him something he might say. The tower of Siloam fell on those 18 worse sinners than those in Jerusalem. And that servant which knew his Lord's will and did not follow it shall be beaten with many stripes. Yet he who did things deserving of stripes will be beaten with few. And then we go to verse 13, or chapter 13. Told him about about Galileans' blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices, which was on the 14th day of Nisan, when a Jew called Barabbas was freed. And then back to chapter 12, verse 51. Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth? I tell you no. I, Jesus, come to give you division. From henceforth shall be 5 in one house, divided 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. How is it that you do not discern this time? This is verse 56. And why do you not judge what is right? When you go with your adversary to the magistrate, as you are in the way, give diligence that thou mayest be delivered from him, lest he hail thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and the officer cast thee into prison. You will not depart till you have paid the very last mite. And then chapter 13 again, verse 6. Jesus told a parable. A certain man had a fig tree in his vineyard, and told the vineyard keeper, for 3 years I came seeking fruit on this fig tree and found none. Cut it down. Why does it use up the ground? He answered, leave it alone this year until I dig around it and fertilize it. If it still bears no fruit, cut it down. Okay. I think that's the end of the parallel. But now I have to turn the page again. And this is kind of ridiculous right now, but I'm trying to persevere with some extreme computer issues. Not that extreme, just par for the course. Okay, in this example, the conceptual parallels are so numerous that it is remarkable that they have not been seen before. Firstly, our protagonist finds there are Jews lying in wait for him to catch him. So our protagonist being both Jesus and Titus. So both of them find there are Jews lying in wait for him to catch him. 2, then the story involves a falling, using the Greek word pipto, at or near the Tower of Siloam, outside Jerusalem. Number 3, innocent people are described as being beaten more so than comparatively guilty people in the same context. Number 4, Jewish blood is described being shed at the sacrificial altar of Jerusalem on the 14th day of Nisan, which relates to the freeing of at least one Jew. Number 5, the protagonist, Jesus or Titus, comes to bring division. And the refrain is repeated that there is a house divided, but in this case, a conflict is described where 3 groups are pitched against 2 groups. Number 6, there is a discussion of who was able to discern what is right to do, and indeed to discern whether to go with your adversary. And it is mentioned that one is blocking the path of another, and that a legal judgment must be made, and that the judge decides whether to deliver you or punish you, with the outcome of the conflict being that amends must now be made and a price would be extracted. And number 7, and the story progresses to discuss a man coming for 3 years who proceeds to order that digging all around should be undertaken and cutting down of at least one fruit tree. Okay, so those are the 7 pretty detailed parallels between those 2 sets of verses. Now, he did a little bit of contorting, like going back and forth in Luke from 11 to 13 to 12. So I'm not exactly sure how he's going to plot the points, but we'll determine that tomorrow. But you can definitely not deny how detailed those 7 parallels are, and that it had to be on purpose. But one other thing is that they parody each other. So it's not that one is parodying the other. It's both of them are parodying each other. So they had to have been written at the same time by the same people at the same